and really just balance out all those different areas, right? You really want to talk to other residents as well, and Professor Yang mentioned you have some alumni that are at Mount Sinai, other places in the U.S. as well, doing different pieces. You want to keep in touch with them and to find out what are they doing, what are they, who do they find to be most useful, and then you can try to find out the individual characteristics of that program, right? What made it special? Why is it? What are they proud of? How is their training a little bit different than another program that might be close by? What's their identity? So you try to match up your skills with some of those pieces as well. Not sure how to advance this. Oh, there. Sorry. So back to the question: am I competitive? So, these are Dr. G's different rules as he's looking at it. And it's basically, how do you know if you're competitive? You look at your rank lists, right? See how do they compare to others, right? You look at score cutoffs. The scores do matter. USMA scores do matter. But I would say beyond that, going back to, again, where have other people matched, and how much of this was because they trained there versus, they had a relationship there, or they're very competitive because they've done some research or publications or additional areas. Talking to alumni certainly is important as well. I would say additionally in psychiatry, the personal statement is very important as well, which kind of tells your story, what you might want to do in the field as well. It kind of varies on how important it is by the specialty as well. General rules, things that are more competitive, of course, the academic programs, right, that are more competitive generally the community programs. Community ones tend to be a little bit more clinically oriented. Large cities, coastal areas, more desirable areas to live, like Taipei. Those are, certainly attractive. Boston, New York, Los Angeles, those areas are very competitive. A little bit less competitive as you go to the Midwest or some other places that are further from the water, typically. And then well-established are usually more competitive than newer programs. And there are a number of new programs in medical schools across the U.S. as well. And the beauty of that, because we have a new program relatively in psychiatry, is that you help get to shape the curriculum. The challenge of that is that you have relatively less alumni that you can talk to, and less experience, for some of the supervising faculty. So you have to balance it out as well. So you guys have been around for 50 years, what I'm hearing today, right? So clearly a well-established program here. Our department has actually been around 100 years, but the residency program was restarted just the last 5-6 years ago. So relatively recently. And then you kind of divide up your application pools into these 3 different tiers. So your dream, your reach schools, right? If you could get into, then that's the top tier. Your average schools, that you think you are competitive for. And then what we consider more your safety schools, meaning what you're most likely to match into now. In psychiatry, it's harder to find the safety schools now because it is so competitive. So it just varies a little bit by specialty. Internal medicine, I think, still has quite a few IMG matches as well. So, in terms of just a normal application cycle, just being mindful of getting things out on time. So, first day, get everything ready. Don't wait till a few days in because there's so many applicants that you want to make sure that you're on time, getting things out right away. Make sure that there's no typos. You can use your AI or whatever you're using to double check your essay to make sure that there's no typos or grammatical errors, those kind of things. Have a few human readers look it over as well, particularly in the field that you're applying to. Your letter of recommendations are important as well, particularly if they speak to you personally and are a little bit more personalized versus maybe a little bit more form letter. And then board scores, as well, trying to make sure you get your USMLEs in as well. And then, basically what Daniel was saying here is don't be late. If you get past the starting date, you might not get an interview. So that's really important to be on time. And again, for psychiatry programs, personal statement matters a lot more just because we spend a lot of time with people, right? So do spend some time with that. And then talk to people that have written personal statements or edited quite a few. And there are many that have done so. And certainly, we can help connect you to people in the U.S. as well for that piece. Here's Dr. G's advice on personal statements as well. you want to think about just telling a compelling story. Don't go too long, 500 words is good enough, right? But tell a story as to why you're interested in the field, why you're committed, what's your vision for yourself. I often tell my students when they ask me for a letter, what are you going to be in 10 years, right? If everything goes well. No one's going to hold you to that, right? In 10 years, no one's going to say, well, you claimed this in your statement, but now you went into geriatric psychiatry, or whatever it is. But as long as you have a vision, it helps the selection committee know, oh, this is someone that might go into this field, right, this area. And then when you do get an interview, hopefully, be prepared. Anything that you put in your statement or anything you put in your CV or your application materials is considered to be fair game to be discussed, right? So if you wrote your statement about rock climbing, they might ask you about it, right? If you wrote your personal statement about saving somebody's life when you're a teenager, they might ask you about that. And if you wrote your statement something about research, they certainly might ask you about that piece as well. So just be prepared, right? And do some practice interviews as well. And then, if you don't have a relationship with the program, Dr. G recommends that you consider writing a personal statement specific to that program, right? So, if you really have your heart set on going to Boston or New York or one of those programs, Dr. Huang here did his training in New York and Boston. I did some training in Michigan and Boston as well. And, they're competitive programs, even if you're a U.S. applicant as well. But consider personalizing it. Show how much you've read about that program, right? Who have you followed? Who have you met maybe at an international conference in your chosen specialty? And try to include that piece as well. And then it can't be said enough, but get multiple people to review it, particularly people that have been around a long time, have mentored a lot of graduates, and are, maybe even former selection committee members themselves at the medical schools as well. A couple additional resources here from Dr. G. And I believe that we can send you the slides if afterwards, so you don't need to take any notes here. There's a PDF, so hopefully you can just kind of listen in. But here's some resources as well if you want to learn more about writing essays. In psychiatry, they're also trying to standardize some of the letters as well so that people kind of have a little bit more of a standard approach versus kind of random, you don't know how strong the letter is by specialty. Now there's also something called signaling, where you have a limited number of signals to say, well, I really would love to go to this program, maybe not so much that program, right? So you can't signal every program. So if you interview at 50, I sent application to 50 or 100 programs, which sometimes people are doing now in psychiatry, for example, you can't signal 50 programs, or you have to choose which ones to signal. And it's strategic, right? Because, everyone might want to go to Harvard or to Yale, right? Those places. And so they get quite a few signals, and in some ways, signals might not be quite as valuable because, so many people are signaling them. But if there's some other program that you're interested in and then they get relatively fewer signals, let them know that they really are one of your top 10 choices or top 5 choices or whatever. And don't waste any signals is what Dr. G is saying by money on the table. And then these days, if you can't get an external rotation, it is good, but many programs don't require them, knowing that there's a lot of hardship. And certainly for, I think, just travel and expense and those pieces, that's challenging for many students, whether you're international medical graduate or in the U.S. So I would say that, it's not required. If you do one, just always remember from day one you're auditioning, right? And so you want to treat everyone kindly from the coordinator, to the professors that you're working with as well. So you're always kind of on the clock, so to speak. And then, just know that people are trying to understand, why are you applying to this program, right? And of course, the more competitive the specialty, the more number of programs you have to apply for. So you just want to do your research if you can. Look at the websites. If there is a social media feed for that particular residency, a lot of U.S. programs have Instagram official handles that are run by the chief residents, for example. Try to look at some of those posts, and see what they're talking about. Some of them on Twitter, I say LinkedIn less often TikTok. But just, we look at some of those pieces just for examples of resident life, and then look for their official websites just to see what they're proud of, right? Sometimes I have a newsletter or something that you can access. So look at those pieces. Different interview resources. The AAMC governs all the medical schools in the U.S. So So that is often a place where you can look for interviewing resources as well. I did also ask one of our recent graduates, Nina, Dr. Liu, who's currently doing child psychiatry fellowship. What would she say? Because she's been through it a lot more recently, and she was in the first class as well. Actually, second class. She said basically, be realistic, right? As you're applying, think about and look at the trends from the U.S. Match. If some areas are very competitive, consider having a backup specialty, maybe a couple even, and know which ones are a little bit more competitive or less competitive. And then look for programs that have matched international medical graduates, right? Often there's a bit of a legacy there, people you can talk to from their alumni to kind of show what they did and how they got there. We mentioned a strong personal statement, and she recommends, use essay editing services if need be. Even better, I think, if you can talk to someone that's been through and written quite a few of them, or has reviewed quite a few of them. And then clinical experiences or research at an associated institution can be helpful if you can get that piece as well. And I think there's Sundar could probably say a little bit more about the research piece, but that often is a great way to kind of make those ties as well. Additional recommendations from Dr. Liu, basically get a strong recommendation from people if you can. Again, the more personalized it is, the better it is typically. So having spent significant time in their lab or clinical rotation or whatever it is. Networking is important. So if you do attend a conference, an American or international or Taiwanese, conference, whatever it is, just make sure you're networking. Try to work with your professors to meet people that might be helpful or might move you along in this direction and introduce yourselves. If you're navigating a conference for the first time, try to look over the program, right, and decide which talks you're going to go to. Read the papers in advance if you can of the people that are presenting. Try to, if they look them up on social media, they might have a professional feed that can see what they're interested in, and then introduce yourself. And I think that's okay. And that's probably a more high-yield way to use your conferences as well. And then, again, she also recommends that specific letter for certain programs as well, knowing what they're looking for, maybe some of their things they're proud of in their curriculum, maybe signaling that with your essay. And then practice interviewing, right? There's nothing like practicing an interview. That's one thing to talk to your friend, another to have your parent, probably better to have a professor, someone from a selection committee, or could be residents, or people that have recently been through it as well. But just think about, different pieces. You don't want to sound too rehearsed, but at the same time, you don't want to be, caught sort of open mouth and no answer if they ask you something as well. It's kind of this balance of, being able to have a normal conversation, but also in a highly stressful situation, which we all recognize if we are interviewing people as well. So, have an understanding of American cultural norms and the U.S. medical system. I think that is, it's important. At the same time, I think just by pop culture and other piece references, I think you can probably get by for the most part as well. So understanding the U.S. medical system is probably important to some extent as well, just because there are some contrasts, of course, with your medical system here as well. One thing I do speak a lot on for U.S. medical students is just the importance of developing a professional social media presence. I don't know if that is a big deal here or not, Professor Ying. So it sounds like it is, but different platforms. Some of them they're all very different, and it's hard to navigate. By and large, I still find most U.S. graduates are on Twitter, so now called X. So that's really where they're coming out, particularly in their fourth year of medical school, which is their final year in the U.S. Then they come out and say, hi, I'm person X, and this is my interest, in topic Y, I'd love to connect, and I'm interested in this field, right? That's what I love to do. And then they use the hashtags for that piece. I mentioned that several of the U.S. academics have moved over to Blue Sky as well, and that's another platform to look at as well. So even if you can't get to a conference in the U.S., which is probably most people because it's expensive, and also you are training right now full-time, try right now to create a social media presence, right? And just think about that piece and be consistent with it. If you use it at least weekly, you'll probably have some ways to connect and talk to other people. as well. So I would recommend it. One of my jobs is for the American Psychiatric Association. I chair the Council on Communications, which is just about communicating with the public for organized psychiatry. And my just rules of thumb is if you are running a professional handle, right, not your personal page, but your professional page, Dr. X or Future Dr. X, then you probably want to, there are certain rules that you might not in your normal social media page, right? So anytime I post, I think about 3 sets of readers, right? One is if you're seeing patients, understand your patients might see your posts, right? And they might have a different name, so you wouldn't know that they're your patients online, right? So just assume anything you put out might be seen by your patients, right? So PR is public relations in the U.S., which means that, for NYCU, whoever's running your media, social media, and those pieces for the institution, they might see it because usually they kind of look to see, just make sure they're comfortable while you're posting. So certainly I do that, talking to our UNMC public relations folks as well. And then peers, people like everyone in this room, make sure if they see it that they're comfortable with it as well. In the U.S., quite a few people use these private Facebook forums for doctors and so on, and they have conversations. But always just recognize that some of those conversations, people can take a snapshot and then post that somewhere else. So you just want to be careful that anything you say, assume it's public, right? And then you'll be okay. So some additional pieces on Twitter. There's a great page called Inside the Match. I'm not sure if some of you follow that or not, but that is a not-for-profit group that is created by a medical student in WashU St. Louis, and now she's a resident actually at a military hospital. So that's run by medical students and by residents, and so they've got quite a few articles, and that's a good place for you to kind of just get some of the basics, some additional deeper layers as well. So I would recommend going to visit them and learning more about them. The AANC I mentioned is the American Association of Medical Colleges, and so they have quite a few different resources as well, like this Visiting Student Learning Opportunities page, if you do want to learn more about how you coordinate and arrange visiting rotation. And again, I think you'll get all the slides after you guys are done with this talk. These are just some recent articles from Inside the Match. I just kind of put in IMG and what are some pieces, and these are some examples of tips to match, tips to do research, and tips to find rotations as well. So those are some recent articles that you just put it in as IMG as a search term on that website as well. So I mentioned research, definitely clinical rotations are important. If you can, I think committees still are one of the best ways to get to know faculty. So these are different committees I've served on, starting as a resident and as a fellow. But if you could do one as a med student, you'd be even earlier on. But very few people do serve on committees at that point. But it's just good because you get to know people, right? And that's really how to get to more personalized letters. So you can do that. Also, again, research as well. But you want to have someone write something that's authentic about you, right? Knowing who you are and not just using a form letter that they put in for everybody, every med student. So that's important. Now just pivoting a little bit, second part, some of you asked, I think you noticed that I have an executive MBA, and you asked some questions about that, pros and cons. I'll read some of your questions. What practical benefits has it brought to your management skills in areas like team management, strategy development, and improving efficiency? Has the EMBA had a tangible impact? And have there been particular management challenges the MBA helped you tackle? Great question. Second question, how is combining an MBA with an MD shape your perspective? Has this combo proved a unique advantage in healthcare decision-making? Has it enabled you to better understand the economic and operational aspects of the healthcare industries? Certainly happy to talk about that. And then thirdly, what career advice would you give to someone from a medical background considering an MBA? Any insights, especially for those aiming at healthcare management, entrepreneurship in healthcare, or leadership roles within large healthcare organizations? So really great, very thoughtful questions. I will say that your questions are much more thoughtful than my questions when I was at your career stage. So, very, very impressive. I will say I went back to my to-do list. This is back when I was a child fellow in Boston. And one of them was exactly about this topic, but it was several years later. But 9 years prior to me actually getting an MBA, just this is on my to-do list, is really think about the differences between an MBA, executive MBA, part-time MBA. So I'll talk about that. But I will say a couple things. So one is it's tempting to try to get everything done right now. But you have different career phases. And you have to sometimes give yourself space to have some work experience before getting some degrees, right? So I did consider getting an MBA right after fellowship, or during, some of them you can do it during fellowship or during med school, the various combos. But I think it'd be a different experience than doing it. When I started my MBA, I was interim chair, and so I had different challenges then, right? So I think there's no right or wrong answer, but we'll talk about the different pieces here. Executive MBA, they assume that you are working full time, and then you're doing the MBA in your fictional weekend and evening free time, or early morning. So that's everyone that's doing it is working full time, and so they tend to be a little bit more senior people, right? MBA, of course, you can do it anytime. It's not necessarily specific to healthcare, right? And part-time MBA is similar. You can do it anytime as well. So my different roles after fellowship. So Dr. Sinja Huang and I trained at the same place in Boston, and he went to the IMH fellowship doing research, and I basically joined the faculty directly. I mentioned I spent most of my first 10 years mostly doing education. So I did a psychiatry clerkship, which is really working with third-year medical students doing clinical rotations in the U.S., and that's where I first learned to listen to med students who really had all the best ideas to make the clerkship better. And then I was state workforce director, which is sort of working with different professions, psychology, psychiatry, different areas, and just thinking about what are all the needs for growing up a workforce, particularly in underserved areas. Then after that, I was doing faculty development, which is really about leadership development, and also just trying to build a national network. And it was at that point that I got the MBA, executive MBA, when I became the interim chair of psychiatry, and the dean asked me to serve in that role. So that was 9 years out. and so, the first challenge then was to start a residency program. And so that was what he tasked me with. And then the other piece was partnering with the chair of emergency medicine, because they had such a long length of stay for their patients in the emergency room waiting for psychiatric placement, that we talked about building a psychiatric emergency room there, which is not something that had been done in the state where I lived at that point. So that required program design. So yes, it was, both of these were kind of MBA topics that were relevant. The last piece I would say, since getting the MBA, I guess I was president of the National Med Student Education Group, and it was during the COVID pandemic. We were not having physical meetings like this. And so really part of that challenge was learning to navigate and really hold things together in a time in an organization which is very dependent on people paying their registration and dues. How do you keep that fiscally, alive and floating, and keep the members engaged who are only meeting on online? So that was part of the challenge. So we did design the emergency room. It's been up now for 3 years. We're going in its 4th year this December, and it's seen, I think, over 7,000 patients since then. And but to do that, we had to really develop a business model for it. Talk to the hospital C-suite, which are the CEO and the chief operating officer and the chief financial officer with a business plan, and just say, well, it may not make money, but at least it's going to increase the flow in the emergency room, where you can then make up some of the costs, right, for higher revenue services, like, surgeries and some of those pieces. So it was kind of a balancing of those pieces. And then just trying to develop a common vision of bringing some of those C-suite members and other emergency room chair and so on with me to look at different sites. So we looked at 3 different sites before we developed one at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. That was a good model. And then it was finding a consultant and really making it come together. So it really was very much like a business school problem, in that you had to kind of have a plan, you had to really convince people, and then you had to create an operating staff, and then you had to recruit them, and then as soon as harder is retain them to keep working in a place that was 24/7 staffing. You basically have a person working at all times, right? So Monday through Sunday. So it definitely was a good application for the MBA, and I think it was helpful for that piece as well. So yes, I would say that was a good application. And if I had done my MBA earlier, I think in med school I would have forgotten a lot of those pieces. So I think it's better to use it right away if you are going to do it. I mentioned being an organization president as well during COVID, and that was challenging in that we didn't have much money, and most of our revenue was generated through in-person conferences, and we couldn't have one. So we really had to create our first virtual conference and then hope that people came and attended, and we did it, and I think it worked out okay. But it was challenging, and I would say that still many organizations in the U.S., I'm not sure about Taiwan, are still recovering from the COVID pandemic. There's still, less conference attendance in person, still more people are attending online. So I think a lot of those challenges remain. And here, I guess the MBA application is really network strength, really thinking about how do you develop member engagement when you can't meet in person anymore, right? If you can't network, go to coffee, go to dinner with somebody, have a drink afterwards, whatever it is, at the annual meeting to really develop that business relationship. How do you do it online? So that's really what we worked on. And what's the business model to at least keep the organization afloat, keep it moving forward as we're kind of moving ahead. So I did survive. We're back to annual meetings now in person, but it definitely was challenging. It was different. So other questions from this group. What factors did you consider when choosing your MBA program? What are key considerations? Is it curriculum, alumni network, or location? Short answers, all three are important. And then how has the MBA influenced your personal growth and leadership style? I think I mentioned that earlier. Has it changed your personality, management approach, or leadership abilities? I can talk briefly about that. Do you plan to lead or manage an economic entity? Not at this time. But are you aiming to enhance your capabilities for leading or managing an economic entity through the MBA? I think it would help to have some of those skills. But at the same time, people also look for experience as well. You can couple the sort of book learning with the experience piece. So really, again, I encourage you to think about having a leadership role by the time you get your executive MBA, or even better, having a couple of different roles along the way as well. What ways to help with resource allocation, decision-making processes, and cross-functional collaboration? Talk about that as well. So just brief review. I did get my MBA at the University of Colorado, Denver. I got it through a slightly non-traditional pathway in that in our state, they give out one scholarship every year to one physician. So I applied for that and was selected for that. So my MBA was free. So now, most people don't have that pathway. I do understand that. But many organizations will either consider subsidizing your executive MBA if you're at a senior enough level, or at least giving you some protected time to do it while you're doing your senior leadership role. So just think about different pathways. So I guess the answer to the first question was, I sort of chose my MBA because it was free, but also it ended up working out because it was specific to healthcare administration. So again, thinking about how specific, not specific you want to be. You have a lot of partnerships. I know you're thinking about different areas of AI, technology at this medical school, right? So you have a lot of different pathways here that might also consider a non-healthcare MBA, right? So thinking about technology partnerships, Professor Sue here does a lot of work with our colleges of engineering at University of Nebraska as well. So I think there's a lot of interesting, arguments for not just doing a health administration MBA as well. But anyways, we had our session was built around a little more than 2 years, and then going in for a week at a time, and then having a lot of online coursework, project work in between, because they knew we were all doing other work full time. I'm doing a lot of reading, which is important, but I would say even more so were the online discussions. We did work in small groups. In my group was an orthopedics hospital, chief financial officer, somebody else doing women's health. So people doing other fields of medicine that were very different than mine. Emergency physician, somebody else has research administration as well. So just having diverse groups that you're working on with your team. And again, the more leadership experiences you've had in your belt, or industry experiences as well, will help you as you're thinking about the cases during the MBA as well. So during the MBA, part of it is that, it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, in that people that are motivated in finding other jobs, they get an MBA, and then people are looking for the next set of leaders they also like to see who's getting an MBA. So during our program, quite a few people got new jobs, right, during the program. So there's like 35 of us, I think, and so you see, maybe 15 of us got new jobs during this time. And since then, it's been a couple of years now, but I would say a whole other set of group of our alumni have gotten new jobs as well. So sometimes people do market, to see if, this is something that is of interest and also might fit up with some of their needs as well. So I would say it can be a catalyst for you getting a new job as well. So these are just some of the quotes from the graduates from that program. I was asked to give the graduation speech, so this was just some quotes from some of my classmates as to what they got from the MBA. I won't read all of them, but really it was kind of a blend of real-world strategy, but also the network. And then some of the curricula was very useful. Some of them probably less useful for depending on what you're doing with it. So I think probably a whole blend of different things. Back to your questions, I would say a couple things. Timing. My personal advice would be don't feel pressed to get it right during med school or shortly after med school. If you are going to do it, I'd recommend you do it 2 or 3 leadership roles in, so you've got some working experience, right? You also know your gaps, what you're not good at, and what you are good at, because you're never going to be good at everything, right? None of us has enough time to be good at everything. So just think about, what are some of those things, and when you know yourself, that might be the time, right? So I would say, I guess that's early mid-career, maybe that might be the timing wise. Think about finances, right? For it to pay off, will your institution pay or subsidize or at least protect your time to do it? Is it clear after you do it that they will recognize that and value that as something that, will then mark you for the next leadership role? I have had colleagues that self-funded their MBAs, executive MBAs, and then they stayed in the same job because their department or their institution was not looking to pull them up. So you have to kind of balance that piece as well. Program selection, I think flexibility is important, particularly because you're probably working a full-time job. If it's executive MBA, a healthcare focus or engineering or other focuses, as well, as we mentioned. I think all those could work. Curricula, I would say there's probably some standardization depending on what you are studying, but the alumni network can be important, the next piece, particularly if you are looking to go to build business cases after that, right? So, or if you're looking for moving around or doing different areas, the network is key, and you can help maintain that. Both of the groups that you graduated with, and then really actively networking with those that might also have graduated from the same institution. You can look for them online on LinkedIn and other kind of social media platforms. Just thinking about what you are keeping up with, it does change things. I guess when I see proposals from faculty, I do think about the academic merit, but I also do think about the financial aspects as well. Part of why we're also here is we would love to develop, additional ties, in Taiwan and also in East Asia as well, with our institution. And, Professor Su has done quite a bit, and Professor Huang with different countries, but really looking at that piece, but part of, even our discussion back to our institution is what's the value add on both sides, right? And part of it's academic collaboration, part of it might be future network strength, right? Might be future collaborations on research side. How do you frame that as you're talking to your stakeholders? So a lot of different opportunities. So I cannot directly comment on the issue of low GDP on the government's financing in Taiwan. It sounds like there's some challenges, here as well as in the U.S., certainly as you've probably heard of. And I would say though that one of the things is you have to keep developing your leadership skills. And I do think that both in the U.S. and probably in Taiwan as well, but I'll defer to Professor Yang and colleagues. There's probably a shortage of physician leaders still. Many healthcare executives are business leaders, right? That go up and run hospitals, run insurance companies in the U.S., other pieces of public health. But I think that if you are clinically informed, if you still, like Professor Yang still does some clinical work, right? As you're chairing your medical school here. And I think that's outstanding because it keeps you grounded, right? And in our system too, you need to think about, how do you translate those skills into practical things every day, so I'm still doing leadership programs. The MBA wasn't the end. I just finished one that was actually with other higher education leaders, University of Nebraska, in different colleges and, engineering and agriculture, different areas. So just kind of learn what are some of their needs and what are kind of some of their areas that they're hoping to really partner up with healthcare on. And then I think there's a lot to learn by doing more international work. And so again, I mentioned the World Psychiatric Association as something that I've been engaged in the last 4 years on the medical student side. I think that in itself has really taught me quite a bit about the needs and also some opportunities on both sides. So wherever you are in your career, something one of my former professors taught me that I think is helpful is just thinking about your time. Thinking about it as, we all have limited time in our week, right? So you're taking one valuable hour to meet with us, which we really, very, very, very much appreciate on our end. But your time it's never enough, right? You never have enough time. So my mentor taught me, with your week, or maybe your month, you write out your different sections. How much time do you spend clinically, seeing patients? How much time are you spending writing or doing research, right? How much time is strategic planning for your future, right? Thinking about the questions like the executive MBA or which medical school or residency I'm applying for, or fellowship, looking at the IMG trends for acceptance by the match rates. How much time are you spending on self-care, exercise, meditation, spirituality, those different areas? How much time are you spending with your family? How much time volunteering, spiritual life, that's important, all of these areas. But, think about your current time and draw that out, kind of chart that out. And then also do the same exercise with your ideal state, And if you do this exercise periodically, at least, every 3 years or so, you'll find that sometimes your current time allocation is not really what you want your ideal time to be. And if you try to match those two, talk to some mentors, or people who are senior in your field, and the US we call them sponsors, who are kind of very senior in the area, and say, well, I'd love to be spending more time doing research, right? But spending all my time doing clinical work, or vice versa, I was doing research, but I really, want to get out of that now, really spend more time doing whatever it is, teaching, writing, administration. How do I make that transition, right? So really just be thoughtful about it. And as you're thinking about that piece, keep changing, right? Keep trying different things out. And about every 3 to 5 years, it's probably good to kind of see where you're at, where you need to flex for the future. So, some questions to leave you with at any career stage, just thinking about things. I used to run faculty development, so I used to also meet with the faculty about this as well. But whether you're a med student or faculty member, does your schedule reflect your values? Now, we all need to do some work that we don't always love to get where we want to go, so that's one thing, right? But beyond that, what do you want to be doing, right? So if it is research, you may not have protected time for it, right? But sometimes you have to go and spend your evening, weekends, if that's what you want to be the chair of the medical school someday, right? So, maybe you love to be spending more time learning about AI, but you're just spending all your time cramming for the USMLE, right? So, how do you then create that time? What is it how did your mentors or sponsors learn about that? And how do you learn from them? So maybe spend time, ask them to have coffee with you, ask them that question, right? It might be just changing what journals you're reading to learn about it. There's also informatics meetings now, where people are going in healthcare to learn more about AI and health applications as well. Space for creativity or play is important. A lot of my roles have been through accident or because someone else left and the dean asked me to do something, or the chair. And just know that there's a lot of changes that might occur in your career, right? So you're thinking about that, but always have something for creativity, something that you're doing on the side that you enjoy. A lot of my work in social media is just kind of by accident, just kind of enjoy doing it, and then I ended up doing it for the American Psychiatric Association. But, if you enjoy it, you're more likely to do it well, and then you can teach others as well. And then with technology in particular, is also called kind of the inverse of expertise, right? It may be that you know more than your professors in some of these emerging technologies, right? Either from what you're reading, what you're doing, or just your interest areas. So you may be able to bring expertise to their lab or to their project that they may not have, right? So be forthcoming with those pieces and be curious about those things as well. It's always important in the career stage to have people that are honest with you as well. The more senior you rise, the fewer people will say, that's a really bad idea, or you probably, might have said that differently. That didn't come across well, when you try to say that piece. So always have those people that will be honest with you on the way back and give you some challenging feedback, right? And they might be more senior to you. They might be your peers as well, but just think about growing that group. And then as you get more senior and mid to late career as well, and more successful and those things happen, you're lifting other people up, right? You're creating this really pipeline of people that will then carry on that legacy of whatever their interest is, right? And it might not have to be the same as yours, but are you lifting those people up? And then thinking about what's called succession planning, which is just who's going to take over for you. You know, none of us are going to stay in our roles forever, right? And are you really actively mentoring that next group coming up? And are you engaging with them, sharing with them mentors and tips? So with that, you know, I think I'm happy to take some questions as well. These are my 4 kids, one of whom's wandering around Taipei today. You know, just remember it's a long journey. Think about it every 3 to 5 year kind of, you know, chunks, and take some time to enjoy yourself, right? And enjoy the journey along the way. It's a great field. I think it's competitive as well, we know, but you know, make sure you're sustainable along the way, and keep up some of those hobbies, which also will help you with the interviewing, to talk about something when they say, tell me about yourself. And you don't just want to talk about your USMLE scores. You want to talk about how you love hiking or camping or cooking or whatever it is as well. So, so with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. This is kind of a room where I don't know if we need the microphone, but there's another microphone here. And I know we're probably past time though, is that correct?